A new agreement on the reduction of bureaucracy is intended to make trade and services considerably easier in future, especially for SMEs. A group of 67 members of the World Trade Organization, the WTO, including the EU, concluded negotiations on a corresponding initiative on Thursday. Executive Vice President Valdis Dombrovskis described the agreement as a great achievement and emphasized, "The agreement reached today applies to 90% of global trade and services and will generate billions in growth through clearer rules, more transparency, and less bureaucracy. This helps our SMEs in particular to flourish on a global scale. We have been a driving force behind this initiative, which is also a priority of the new EU trade strategy. The joint initiative for the internal regulation of services will simplify unnecessarily complicated regulations and introduce relief for procedural hurdles that SMEs in particular are confronted with. This agreement will help reduce the cost of providing services around the world by over $150 billion annually. It is the first result that the WTO has had in a long time in the area of trade and services. Good regulatory practice is central to a functioning economy in our time. The clear transparency and licensing regulations in the service sector that were agreed in the course of this initiative will make trade and services considerably easier. This is particularly useful for small and medium-sized businesses that do not have the resources and experience of their larger competitors when it comes to dealing with complex procedures. In addition, the agreement will be useful for the EU in terms of its digital agenda, as it is quite beneficial for sectors such as telecommunications, IT services, engineering, and commercial banking. In addition, a WTO text contains for the first time a binding provision on non-discrimination on the basis of gender. Services are the largest and fastest growing sector of the economy today, but complex regulations and procedures limit trade and services significantly. With this initiative, qualification requirements and procedures, technical standards and approval requirements, and procedures for service providers are aligned. The WTO members involved in this initiative will enter into specific commitments by the end of 2022 to facilitate trade and services on their markets, for example by simplifying the approval process or ensuring transparency. The adoption and implementation of the disciplines provided for in the reference document will lead to a sharp drop in trading costs for service providers. This means that the sector will be able to recover better in the period after the COVID-19 crisis. It is in this sector that women entrepreneurs often play an important role. The reference document recognizes their role and ensures that approval procedures do not result in gender discrimination. This is the first of its kind to have been developed in the WTO framework. These new obligations are included in the so-called GATS list of the individual members. Every WTO member has submitted such lists to the WTO. They form the overall package of all obligations the WTO members enter into so that foreign service providers are permitted to enter their markets. The new commitments made under this initiative will apply to service providers from every other WTO member state on the basis of the so-called most favored nation principle. And I'll see you in my next video. Bis gleich.